caution. Your paradigm is about to shift at the intersection of fact and reason. You're entering Kingston Country.
I'm Dan Kingston, and you're listening to the Dan Kingston Podcast. Today's guest is Matt Brazil, research fellow at the Jamestown Foundation and co-author of Chinese Communist Espionage, an intelligence primer. Thank you for joining the podcast today, Matt.
Happy to be here.
Well, so far we have over 73,000 coronavirus cases, 1,875 deaths. Flights from China have stopped. Hundreds of Americans coming from China have been placed in quarantine at military bases. And American officials are saying, avoid any kind of travel to China. So that's the latest right now. Matt, Brazil, what do you make of the way China's been handling this situation?
Well, I think, first of all, that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and its government deserve some credit, and the Chinese people certainly deserve a lot of credit for taking the brunt of this problem and trying their best within their limits to handle it. At the same time, of course, there have been a lot of problems, and the number one problem that lies at the center of it is this unfortunate tendency to cover things up first, and especially at the local level, and then there's inaction for a long time while the regime worries about instability that might result from talking about it too much, and then finally the central government steps in and takes extraordinary action. And I'm afraid this has happened over and over again in the history of the Chinese Communist Party. It certainly happened back in November 2002 when SARS was first discovered, and eventually the regime got around and took action and stopped the spread of the disease. But as one expert in the field I'd recommend everybody take a look at, his name is Yanzhong Huang, and I'll spell that in a second. As Yanzhong Huang of the Council of Foreign Relations says, it's like a Greek tragedy. It just happens over and over again. With this pattern of covering up inaction and then extraordinary action. Similar to, I would have to say, similar to the way Facebook as a company reacted to the 2016 election problems. Cover up, no action, and then extraordinary action that actually turned out to be less than extraordinary.
Well, it's a human problem, covering up things to make ourselves look better, and it's always the cover-up that gets you in trouble, it looks like. At least that's the phrase people use. And specifically this time around, the doctor that first recognized coronavirus was, apparently he was detained by authorities. They made him promise to shut up, stay quiet. And then he ended up getting infected and passing away himself. And this is one of the huge issues right now. The Chinese people are so angry about that. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, Li Wenliang was his name. And again, this is a indicator of a systemic problem in China that a lot of people study and a lot of people comment on, and that is that the most trusted institutions are generally in Beijing. The military and the party central committee and the party leadership are generally trusted to make good decisions and get things done. But the people who are not trusted in China are at the local level, the local CCP committees, local government, who are known to take bribes and known to engage in all sorts of corruption and are constantly being investigated by the center. Sort of the opposite of here, where the military is trusted. Congress is not trusted at all because they're known to take bribes from corporations to craft legislation in the interests of big business. And then the civil service is kind of trusted, but the military is most trusted because they have the national interest at heart. And so with Li Wenliang, what happened was that he was not a specialist in the field, and so he was not immediately trusted. But the problem is that he was pointing out a real problem, and the local officials were terrified to death that they would be blamed for this, and so they covered it up.
Because there's also that history of scapegoating over there too, right? I mean, the ability to scapegoat the local officials is already happening. People getting fired in Wuhan, and we'll never really know how much was a scapegoat or really were they to blame or who's to blame because again of that cover-up culture over there. One thing is concerning to me that the diagnostic kits and other resources, medical resources, are in short supply, apparently. And so the numbers coming out of China could, and from my take of it, be off because they don't have enough kits and also because they have this cover-up culture. Now, do you trust the official numbers coming out of China right now, or do you think we need to be skeptical of it?
I think we need to verify them. Because unfortunately, in the history of the CCP, statistics are not always trustworthy. And that's because at the local level, officials are encouraged to report happy news to the center, and this feeds into the problem. And so I think that I think we're getting to the point now where the statistics will be cleaned up, because the World Health Organization is finally getting involved. There are finally some U.S. CDC, Centers for Disease Control people in China doing research. They've been kept out before. Yeah. They're just starting to arrive there now.
That's great news.
So, yeah, I think that we may see better statistics coming out soon.
Well, that's really important. The transmission looks like at least there's cases of asymptomatic transmission where people could spread the virus without showing any symptoms, or some reports of that. Now, for a long time, the Chinese officials were saying there's no evidence of any human-to-human transmission. And so, look, facts change quickly on this, right? And when the CDC, they're going to learn more, and we're going to learn more as this goes on. But is there any reason to believe that, China was an intentional lie, that they're saying there's no human-to-human transmission? Were they hoping to just make this go away? I mean, that's a horrible thing to put out there and then have it come to be that, in fact, there's actually asymptomatic transmission. It's like way worse than that.
Yeah, I think that the news that's come out in the last couple of weeks show very clearly that that people can catch this from somebody who's showing no symptoms at all, as you say. And I think that what's going on really is panic, because at the local level amongst officials, because for some time, for several years, China has been in the grip of a anti-corruption campaign run by Xi Jinping from the center. Xi Jinping being the head of the Communist Party and the president of China. And so officials, even back in 2015, 2016, when I was regularly traveling to China, I noticed a big difference between the willingness of local officials to meet with me as a corporate security manager compared to a couple of years before, because they were concerned that meeting with a foreign official, even a company official, that is the police and other security officials, could lead to charges of corruption being made by enemies of themselves. And so there's been near panic for a long time amongst local officials, and then this thing comes along, and you wouldn't expect somebody who's shell-shocked, in effect, to react all that well.
Somebody listening to this might be surprised. All we hear in the mainstream news, at least majority, is China's the future. Look at China. Look how great China does on everything. And, something like this happens, and you see, is this a house of cards? I mean, look, I don't want to criticize China unfairly, okay? But you do see situations like they say they're going to build a hospital and it turns out to be shipping containers with bars on the windows. And you see weird stuff about people getting thrown away into quarantine centers, and really just, scary stuff of people being chased, and it's impossible to know exactly what's happening on the ground. But you've been to China. You're a Chinese expert, in terms of, the Chinese government and espionage and all that stuff. You've been in the military. You have a lot of experience, and you've warned about stability issues in China in the past. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. but is this situation entirely shocking to you? And why aren't more people talking about these structural issues? Why do we always hear such rosy pictures about China?
I think in part because there is a lot of ignorance about China in this country, far more than in the other direction. People in China know a lot about the United States in general, particularly if they're educated people. But even people who are just casual observers get a lot more news about the United States than we get over here about China. I wouldn't count the Chinese Communist Party out. They have pulled the fat out of the fire so many times in their history that's really where, if you'll pardon the expression, the smart money should go. They are very good at figuring out what the problem is and solving it, even if they're rather late to the game in getting things done. On the other hand, there are significant problems. There are increasing, by any estimate that is available, there are increasing numbers of what they would term instability incidents in the country every year. And these are happening at the local level, and they're usually about local corruption, where officials take over a bunch of farmers, a bunch of land in a rural area to sell or to build something, and there's inadequate compensation to the people who are living there. There's all sorts of problems like this, and some of them are being solved as time goes on. Some of them are not, but one thing that the state has in its corner is that it has a reliable system of political power, a reliable set of security services that are loyal to the state, loyal to the party, and so I wouldn't count them out. On the other hand, things are not as rosy as sometimes depicted by people in business and in other areas where their interest is to see further development of good relations, economic and political relations with China.
So is it a complete conspiracy theory when I'm watching CNN or I'm watching the mainstream news or whatever on, mostly cable TV, and they're reporting things, and I'm saying, you're not looking critically enough at China? Is it a conspiracy theory to think that that's because of corporate interests or business interests or whoever owns CNN, or there's some Chinese businessman that has a stake in CNN's parent company?
If we look at who owns the media in this country, that's why it's called the corporate media. And the corporations that own the big media outlets in this country, they have an interest in showing that relations with China are good and sustainable, and that business should continue to be done. On the other hand, there are also institutional interests that I would consider to be positive, and those institutional interests are maintaining a good bilateral relationship with China, not only economically but politically, because as I say, the CCP is not going away. They're moving toward a more traditional role, more traditional governance model that is going back to the dynasties that worked in China for thousands of years. And when I say that, I'm talking about the move to make Xi Jinping the chairman of everything, as some people like to call him, akin to an emperor, and increasing the authority of the state down to the local level. They're being somewhat successful here, and Xi Jinping is quite popular in China. We often overlook that because in the West we tend to pay more attention to the dissidents and the people who can speak English that we meet in China and so forth. And so I don't think they're going away. And they do have nuclear weapons, and they do have the ability to launch them against us, getting down to the bottom line. So So the institutional interests that I think are valid include maintaining a reasonable and peaceful bilateral relationship with China.
It's horrifying when you put it that way, because you realize that we gotta have to work with them, even though they have these, Uyghur concentration camps, and they're cracking down on Hong Kong, people fighting for liberty over there, and the horrible things you see they're doing against their own people, and yet, we're kind of powerless in the sense that we can't take them over. I mean, we don't want to start a war. We don't want a nuclear war going on out of this. So I guess the question is China going to overtake our economy at some point? Is this coronavirus revealing maybe that they have a little bit more work to do before they become a superpower? Or does this show that, in fact, that they are very powerful, that they can respond to a crisis? What do you think this shows about China and their ability to overtake America as number one superpower?
In part, I think it shows that they have a lot to learn about handling crises like this, because we've seen a lot of the same mistakes that we saw in the SARS outbreak that began in November 2002. But I think it's important to keep this problem in perspective. A lot of people are frightened about China simply because they're a much different civilization, and therefore people are frightened about what their ascent to power might actually mean ultimately for the world. I would want to take a step back and remember how we reacted to the Soviet Union. In the time of the Cold War, we negotiated with the Soviets, and we had different tracks of negotiation. We negotiated about nuclear weapons on one track and about their behavior and our behavior on another track, and we kept them separate. And the reason for that was because the reduction of nuclear weapons was too important to let it be delayed by other things, important though they might be. And I would say we should never back away from defending our core interests, which include our ability to defend allies in the Western Pacific and so on. But at the same time, we have to not panic about this. I remember, for example, when I was a kid growing up in the San Jose area, I used to see aircraft flying over our grammar school on their way out to the Pacific Ocean. They were coming from Moffett Air Base, and they were going out to hunt for Russian submarines. They weren't going out to destroy them. They were going out to track them. Wow. And they were also going out to take a look and see where are these Russian trawlers that are actually signal intelligence platforms that are listening to Moffett Air Base and Treasure Island and all the rest of the Navy bases. Even as a grade schooler, we all knew that. And the teachers would talk to us about it. And it was just part of life. And so getting along with another superpower that does not wish us well, but has a pragmatic interest in survival just like we do, I think we should take a page or two out of that lesson book from the Cold War and look at how we can maintain stable relations with China that nonetheless defend our own interests.
Fantastic advice. And also, I read nuclear submarines are back, this time on the East Coast, apparently, from Russia. So they're trying to, get strength again and create another Cold War presence, it looks like. But, we all know that China is the real big daddy at this point.
This is Kingston Country.
The Dan Kingston podcast is brought to you by Traveling with Janice and Cruise Brothers. This is a great time of year to plan your summer vacations. Lots of great travel specials for cruises and tours. Call Traveling with Janice and Cruise Brothers for all these ideas for families, groups, weddings. 480-648-3324 or email travelingwithjanice@gmail.com. Listen. Scientists worry about the safety of biohazard labs, wherever they're built, in this country, anywhere, because they study the most dangerous pathogens in the world, right? And so I don't know, but did you see, Matt, there's a level 4 biohazard lab located in Wuhan that was studying coronavirus in bats, and there were 2 other labs just a few city blocks away from this animal market, which is, of course, that's the official source where the outbreak is recognized to have happened. But does it concern you that there are all these other biolabs all around there, and that whenever somebody talks about this, they're ridiculed as a fringe theory or conspiracy theorist? Is this something we should be looking at because of the Chinese culture of corruption or not?
Yeah, you're talking about the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and certainly it exists, but I haven't seen any. I've tried to look at this too, and I haven't seen any evidence that Wuhan Institute was actually behind any part of this outbreak. It's really more likely a zoonotic infection, as people call it, zoo, like going to the zoo, a zoonotic infection similar to the flu pandemic in 2009, for example, that killed 17,000 people and originated on a pig farm in Mexico. Even the 1919 Spanish flu may have originated in that way, and so that's probably the most likely explanation, and I haven't seen anything that would indicate that people were bumbling around with bioweapons, and that resulted in a biosafety accident.
But you trust that people that are supposed to be looking into that would be looking into that, if nothing else, just to dismiss it as nothing serious.
Yeah, I think that U.S. authorities are undoubtedly looking into this, and that they may not be talking with Chinese authorities, but anyway, I just haven't seen any evidence surface, and that includes. I was listening to some comments and reading some comments lately. This is my chance to spell his name now, by Yanzhong Huang of the Council of Foreign Relations, and he's really the number one expert on this problem right now in the United States. Anyway, he's both he studies both Chinese politics and problems of medical science, and his name is spelled Yanzhong, all one word, Yanzhong, and his family name is Huang, Yanzhong Huang. You can find him on the web. So your listeners, if they're really interested in digging into this, they might look at the stuff he's written.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'll link to that in the description of this episode as well, because it's really important. Everybody listening, you get all the facts, all the research, and you make up your own mind on what's happening. It wouldn't be a shock to me if more evidence comes forward relating to the biolab. It just seems like a huge coincidence to me. U.S. scientists had warned about it in the past. Can China contain, studying these kind of pathogens? Because if something leaked out, we know they wouldn't, they might cover it up. We know that about China. But right now, it's still a fringe theory. And Matt says, nope, this isn't the what's happening. And he's the expert here. So listen to him. Check out the expert that he's telling you to look at. I want to ask you now, what do you think we should watch out for going forward with China, with the coronavirus? What should people pay attention to? Because, if they're looking on CNN, they're not getting the real news of what's going on. I don't think they should really find that so reliable. So, you gave a great source. People can follow that source, that expert. But what should people also be looking out for? What's in the future?
I think that, number one, don't panic. The virus is not abroad in the land in very many places right now, and it's certainly not here, except for cases that are directly linked to a traveler from Wuhan, and in those cases, the people who were unfortunately laden with the virus have been quarantined, and there's not much reason to believe that it will spread beyond them here, at least under current circumstances. The other thing to keep in mind is that the deaths that are directly tied to this disease are relatively small compared to others. Of course, a lot of people have died, but with SARS back in 2002 and 2003, there was a 9.6% fatality rate.
Oh my God.
And with the coronavirus now, its virulence is still not entirely nailed down, but it's currently rated at 2.1%.
I want to ask you about that, Matt, because I see whenever they release the official numbers, I'm no math expert, but it always equals 2.1%. I mean, almost precisely, exactly, with every single official number release, almost like they want the percent and they work backwards from the percentage.
Yeah, I understand that idea. I think that'll probably. I think it's probably stayed static because the methods of determining who had the disease were less sophisticated than they're becoming. I think they weren't counting not through cover-up, but I think just through methodology. They weren't counting everybody before, and now they're starting to count more people. So we might see some difference there. It might actually go down because the number of deaths is easily attainable. Right. The number of people who are infected is harder to nail down, and that number will probably rise. That's true. Well, we can pray for that and pray for China and the Chinese people. I really appreciate your expertise coming on the podcast today. Matt Brazil, research fellow at the Jamestown Foundation and co-author of Chinese Communist Espionage, an intelligence primer. Go get that book. It's a great one. Thanks, Matt, for your time on the podcast today. Thanks for having me.
Kingston Country. You've been listening to the Dan Kingston Podcast.
Dan Kingston here, asking you to do me a huge favor. Will you possibly rate the Dan Kingston Podcast on Apple Podcasts? Each new rating, believe it or not, really does have a major impact on the way Apple's algorithm recommends content. With just one quick click, you can help promote citizen journalism and end the stranglehold of the mainstream media. Together, we're going to do this. Thank you. I really appreciate your support.